And welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:10 p.m., a bit late today, 9:10 p.m. Central European Time. I need hardly elaborate on how depressing everything is. I mean, fall is here, it's cold, it's wet, the days are getting really brutally short. Any time of day you look out and it's just wet. And it's just a very dismal outlook, and this is what it's going to be like for months on end. Now, on that very cheerful note, let me welcome everybody who has joined me. Really appreciate your being here, and it means that we are now less than 6 hours away, from the make or break event of the 2024 election, namely the debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, this will be the one and only debate. There will be no more debates. And it's very amusing. I was just skimming through some of the mainstream media coverage in which they all essentially adopt the Democratic Party talking points, in which they say, well, this is it. This is Kamala Harris's opportunity to reintroduce herself to the American people. Reintroduce. She's been around for I don't know how many years. She was a senator, then she was a vice president for 4 years, but she has to reintroduce. And so this debate will be the opportunity to reintroduce herself to the American people. They never, so they say, well, that's what makes it important, but they never actually bring out the point. Well, if she has to reintroduce herself to the American people, and if, as they all point out, well, this election schedule is pretty tight. If that's the case, then why not stage a few more debates? I mean, why does it have to be just one debate? Remember, there were 4 debates between Nixon and Kennedy. Then again with Carter and Reagan. I can't remember that was it 1 or 2 debates with Carter and Reagan. But Reagan certainly had 2 debates with Mondale, and then of course we had Clinton, well, the Bill Clintons and the Star Wars. But it became the custom that you would have 3 presidential debates. So you'd have 2 sit-downs plus a town hall. I mean, that was pretty much the format, and Trump and Hillary Clinton had that format. Now, 2020, that was the year of COVID, and there were only 2 debates, but there were still nonetheless 2 debates. There's going to be 1 debate. That's it. There's one debate, and then 1 vice presidential debate. And again, that makes very little sense because the vice presidential debate is not of any great importance. But it seems odd there should be 1 presidential debate and 1 vice presidential debate. But nonetheless, again, media say that they've got their talking points, and that's it. Well, there'll be just 1 presidential debate. Well, if Kamala needs to reintroduce herself to the public, then it would make sense for her not just to have more debates, but it would make sense for her to have more interviews. I mean, if you need to get some more publicity for what you're doing, then the best way to get publicity is to sit down with journalists and see what you have to say. Now, she has finally posted some policy positions on her website. Nothing very interesting there. Usual banalities, growing the middle class and so on and so forth. But she got most of it from the Biden, so nothing of any originality of her own. And what I thought was that was striking is that, particularly on the foreign policy thing, which in a way is yeah, among the most important issues to discuss with the president. I mean, he's the head of the federal government. So what falls within the prerogative of the federal government is obviously foreign policy and, of course, immigration. Now, this is where it gets interesting as to how the media will play because when it comes to policy, whether it's a foreign policy, whether it's immigration, whether it's crime, whether it's the economy, the issues don't favor Biden or Harris. They do favor Trump. I mean, whatever else you can say about Trump's foreign policy. He didn't have two serious wars that America was heavily involved in, and which could easily escalate into a world war. I mean, Trump didn't have that, so therefore Trump can just simply say, "Well, this Ukraine, that didn't happen on my watch. Gaza, that didn't happen on my watch." Now, this makes the situation for the media very tricky because they can't really talk about issues without weakening Harris's position. So therefore, what they need to do, and what they always do in such circumstances, is talk about the things that interest them. And the things that interest them will be the things that will help Harris. Therefore, it is something that we can say with absolute 100% certainty, even as we sit here, just a few hours away from the debate, we can say with 100% certainty that the topic of abortion will take up an enormous amount of time during the debate, because the media figure, and probably rightly, that abortion is a subject that favors the Democrats. And so therefore she can then talk, reproductive choice, and put Trump on the defensive. And that's obviously going to be then they'll bring up the subject of childcare, which is very strange. I mean, I don't remember in any previous presidential debates, I mean, maybe someone can correct me, where childcare came up as an issue to be debated between two presidential candidates. But Jake Tapper did that during the Trump Biden debate, so they bring up childcare because it's an odd kind of an issue. Childcare is largely a personal matter. It's something that people have to decide for themselves how they want to look after their children, and quite what the role of the federal government in that is just difficult to see. I mean, I can sort of see how there might be a role for the state government, but I don't know what the federal government, are they going to mandate the creation of childcare centers? I don't know. It's very strange, but they bring up childcare, and then when Trump kind of waffles on the subject because he was a little puzzled about why he's having to talk about childcare, then they say, Trump is waffling on childcare, so they're going to talk about childcare. They're obviously going to talk about January the 6th, and therefore put Trump on the defensive. Whichever way Trump does it, he's going to be on the defensive. Defensive as to what he did on January the 6th, defense on the defensive about his promises to pardon the people who were involved on January the 6th. And so I think that is going to is going to be there, and that will again give Harris an opportunity to, oh, democracy's on the ballot. We have to respect democracy, and and I'm a tough prosecutor. I don't just let people walk, and Trump is encouraging violence and blah blah. So that's obviously on the agenda for tonight. Then there will be the question of to Trump, do you disavow? And then you can just say, whom should he disavow? David Duke. I don't know if people still remember David Duke, the former grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, but he usually makes an appearance at election time to torment Republicans. You have to disavow David Duke. But that's probably a little bit old. So instead of David Duke, they can bring up the QAnon. QAnon was the one that Chris, what's the name? Chris Wallace, who was the moderator of the Trump Biden debate in 2020. So Chris Wallace said, "Do you disavow QAnon?" And then Trump said, "I don't know what the hell QAnon is." And which I think is a very honest question. If somebody asked me, well, what would you disavow QAnon? I said, I really don't know what exactly QAnon is. No one's ever actually defined it for me, other than that's something very bad and that it's something we have to hate. But who exactly QAnon is and what QAnon actually, what beliefs QAnon subscribes to, I have no idea. But do you disavow QAnon? And I think he also, Chris Wallace, I think, brought up about the what's the name, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers or whatever. So that also you can bring that up as well. You then obviously have to bring up the Trump's legal problems. Again, that works to Harris's advantage. She can talk about his 34-count conviction in New York by a jury of his peers. They're not his peers. But again, that puts Trump at a disadvantage. He has to defend himself. I mean, he can attack the judge. He can attack, the New York judicial system and so on. But he's defending himself. When you're defending yourself, you're losing. But he's going to have to do that. And then he's going to, again, the fraud. Yeah, you've been convicted of fraud in New York. And then ditto. He has to defend himself. And again, he has to attack the New York legal system. And then, of course, his conviction on sexual assault. Again, New York, he has to defend himself. And then he's got these other legal cases pending. So that works to Harris's advantage. Again, the media will talk about that. So what's important then to keep in mind is that this debate will not be a debate about issues. That's the key. There will not be a debate on foreign policy. There will not be a debate on immigration. There will not be a debate on crime. They're going to talk about the things that interest them and that put Trump at a disadvantage. And then, of course, once you do that, once you actually rig the debate in that way, and then you have Trump on the defensive, then they say, "Oh, Harris won." She's probably got some zingers lined up. I don't know what they are, but she obviously has a number of zingers lined up. She has some smart people around her who are no doubt So Hugh Keenan says, "Do you disavow Daisy Duke?" Yeah, exactly, Daisy Duke. That's exactly right. Um, so that's something to look forward to. The other thing that which is an interesting bit of news that's coming from the United Kingdom is you may all be very happy to learn is that Keir Starmer is opening up the prisons and letting out all sorts of quite nasty criminals are being let out early in order to make way for all of the far right extremists that Starmer wants imprisoned. So if you look on the videos today, there are all sorts of uh, footage of people celebrating as to their to their astonishment, they you know, they're departing from prison nice and early, and it's kind of interesting because what Starmer is doing, he is sacrificing the state safety of his own public because these are quite serious criminals who are being released early. He's sacrificing this the safety and security of the British public in order to accommodate the far right. You know, these are his political enemies. His political enemies need to be punished for heterodox views, particularly for their various postings on Twitter and Facebook and all the rest. So they're the ones who have to be imprisoned. You know, you're a murderer, a rapist, where you go. You've done a couple of years. You're out of here. But we just don't have the prison space. So you got to make room for the really serious criminals. And that's really interesting. I don't think anyone has ever quite done that. I mean, it's like you basically you're putting your political enemies in prison, and in a way you're punishing the British people by letting loose on them suddenly thousands of hardened criminals. You're letting them loose on the public, and that's the sort of thing Starmer would do. Starmer really does not like the British people. I mean, that's just to him, he just despises them. And so he definitely thinks that they should be punished. Um, and it's the same with his determination to cut the heating allowance for the elderly as part of his budget cuts. I mean, you think about the heating allowance. I mean, it's chump change. It's not a huge amount of money. But the elderly are not people who vote for Starmer. I mean, he's just basically he's punishing the people who don't vote for him. So he's not going to change his policies on immigration. He made clear he's not going to be in any way thrust from his stance on immigration by the far right riots. So he's going to continue with that. And then he's made clear, if you don't like it, there's a jail cell waiting for you. He's kind of his sadism is quite interesting. I think British people are already feeling nostalgic for the Tories. To be honest, I mean Starmer's poll ratings. I mean, he was July the 5th. So we're talking about he's just over 2 months. He's been in office, and already his poll ratings have plummeted, and he intends to continue along this path. He really does believe that the British people should be punished. He didn't like the fact that they voted to exit the EU. He doesn't like the fact that they don't care for immigration. And he doesn't like the fact that they don't have much time for his green agenda. So therefore, they need to be punished. It's a very unusual government, but at the same time, it's almost like the apotheosis of modern democratic practice. I mean, you have governments that have no accountability at all to the people. And when the people get to choose and vote for whom they want, then the people get punished. The parties for whom they voted are kept out of power, and the people who voted for those anti-establishment parties must therefore be punished for how they voted. You see this particularly in the case of France, that here we have the National Rally, which got the largest percentage of the vote in the second round of the National Assembly election. They came in first. They had the largest percentage of the vote, but through all the machinations among the other parties, the National Rally only won the third largest number of seats. So they got the most votes, but only the left, the New Popular Front, and Macron's ensemble, they won more seats, even though they won fewer votes. And of course, then they decided to keep the National Rally out altogether from the divvying up of the chairmanships of the committees. So the National Rally didn't win any, none, zero. They didn't win any of the committee chairmanships in the parliament. Well, okay, the people need to be punished. And so that's and everyone's very happy about this, but they're suddenly indignant that Macron, who took the logic of ignoring what the voters say, he took the logic of that to its furthest conclusion by saying, well, I'm not going to select anyone from the New Popular Front. I don't like them. I don't want them to form a government. So he selected Michel Barnier, the Gaullist, to be prime minister. Let Barnier to select the government. This, of course, this outrage. Macron is ignoring democracy, the democratic will of the people, ignoring the fact that they had ignored. New Popular Front did not get the larger percentage of the vote. They came quite a way behind the National Rally. But no, a prime minister has to be selected from the New Popular Front. No, not at all. So so you ignore democracy, but of course then you don't like it when you're at the wrong end of people discarding the democracy. So you have that, and then you have the AFD, which won in Thuringia, came in very close second in Saxony. And what was interesting is that I think it was in Saxony that they came very close. So right away, so all the parties said, no, we're going to basically keep out the AFD. That's it. We're not going to. They're not going to have any role at all in government. But they're not even going to smell the seats of power. They're going to be kept out of government. They may have got the largest percentage of the vote, but they're not even going to come, anywhere close to the room in which government ministers sit. But then the AFD was still in a position to at least exercise some power. I think because they had something like 33% of the seats, 33 and a third percent. So in other words, a third of the seats. So if you have a third of the seats, you're in a position to hold the appointment of judges, and you're in a position to hold any constitutional amendments. So this was in the states, and not in the federal government, but in the states. So you get 1/3 of the seats. You at least have that power, even if you're kept out of government. You have the power to um, prevent the appointment of judges and to prevent amendments to the Constitution. And then lo and behold, whoa, they did the numbers, they looked at the numbers, they looked at the software, and they said, no, we made a mistake. The AFD won one more seat than they should have, so we're going to take away this one seat. And the Christian Democrat also won one more seat than he should have, and we're going to give the seat to the Social Democrat and to the Greens, 2 seats. And lo and behold, by doing this, the AFD ceased to have 1/3 of the seats, and therefore it had no power, not even the power to prevent the appointment of judges. What a strange coincidence! It's entirely, coincidental. But you can see how this is going to be more and more of this in every country, where you first of all, you get an election result that you don't like, then you determine to say, that's it, we're not going to recognize it, you're not going to even get a sniff of power. And then, but what about this? We've got a little bit of power here, we can still exercise some power. No, we just did the calculations, we looked at the machines and everything. No, you didn't get that vote. We're taking that vote away from you. You don't have a third anymore. So the vote rigging is the next step. So that's more or less. But Starmer has taken it to the next level. He just despises everybody. I mean, he absolutely despises. He despises even the people who voted for him. But most of all, he despises the British working class. The people who used to support Labour. These are the people who would never in a million years think of voting for the Tories. They absolutely hated the Tories. But these are people he really despises because they don't appreciate his benevolent globalism, and there's the ones who have been punished. But I think it is something quite. I have never seen anything like this when you have these prisoners, hardened criminals, being released in open contempt for the British people. I mean, this has been going on, all day today, in open contempt for the people, when these hardened criminals are coming out of jail, having even though they should still be there for some time, and the only reason they're being released early is they have to make room for the real criminals, the serious criminals, not the murderers and the rapists. No, they're not the serious criminals. The serious criminals are the Facebook posters. Those people who posted racist memes on Twitter. Those are the people who really need to be. So those jail cells, we have to empty out the jail cells in order to imprison our political opponents. And so you see almost like the full circle of kind of the Bolshevism of more than 100 years ago. And obviously the ideas of the Bolsheviks, that, radical socialism, that, that's obviously, is no longer, prevalent. People don't really believe that anymore. But the radical kind of anti-human parts of Bolshevism, that radical contempt for ordinary people, that still prevails. And so that the arrogance that led a small group of people to seize power and to say, we're just going to hold on to power, we don't care what anyone says, and if anyone challenges us, we're just simply going to shoot them. That still is prevails. They're still driven by an ideologist to say it's a kind of very anti-human ideology. It's a very arrogant ideology. It's based on a kind of contempt for what people believe, how people really want to live, because essentially Starmer knows better how people should live and how people should think. So the next step is the re-education camps, and we had a little bit of the re-education camps during COVID, and so, but not quite in the in the ferocious way. I think the re-education camps will be introduced under Starmer, and the others are going to be taking over. So that's the Britain. It's not a good place to be in at the moment. I'd say this is not. This is the more or less bringing in a police state. I mean, when you go into prison for posting memes, when you go into prison for saying mean things about Muslims, saying mean things about boys pretending to be girls, and so on. If you're putting people into prison for that, then we are reaching levels of Bolshevism, and that is Starmer's Britain. So let's see if we can take a look at some of the points made by our locals fraternity. It's always very good for people to join our locals fraternities. You can join, and you don't even have to necessarily pay. The paying is definitely desirable because, as I often explain, the people who run the Gaggle isn't really me. It's those horrific dogs, and they're absolutely savage. They have no respect for me. They just want money in the pot, and then when they don't get it, they just they take out their anger against me. So that's why I'm always pleading here. Please, contribute some more. But anyway, looking at our locals page with Danuki, always good to see you. Says George, will Kamala cackle her way through the debate tonight? Well, the cackling, she's been told to keep that under control, so I'm assuming that she'll keep it under control. And I mean, she cackles the most when she is nervous. That's that it's usually the expression of her nervousness. So I'm assuming that as in that particular format of where she has 2 minutes to speak and so on. But you know there's always a problem with that format that you have 2 minutes to speak and then 1 minute to reply or whatever. Is you actually have to fill up those 2 minutes. And Biden, this was one of the problems that Biden ran into in that first debate in June. He didn't have enough to say. He couldn't fill up the 2 minutes. So he would, say, well, he'd make his point, and then, Jake Tapper says, well, you've still got, 1.5 minutes to fill up. Do you have anything else to add? And then, of course, Biden didn't have anything else to add, and so he would kind of ramble. Now, something like that may happen tonight. I mean, again, Harris wants to say as little as possible, and so she may also be suddenly stuck. After 1 minute, well, I'm done. Well, no, you still got another minute to fill up. You've got to still say something else, and so she might, at that moment, start getting very nervous when she realizes, well, I don't have anything more to add to the 1 minute of BS that I've just simply uttered. So who knows? She may end up cackling out of nervousness. And then Danaki says, and will it matter at the ballot? That's really a tough one. The problem is, and we talk about this all the time, that it's a very divided country. It is a 50-50 country, and has been for some time. Even when Obama used to win, he won 2 elections fairly comfortably. But he only won those elections comfortably because the Republican voters were so disgusted with their two candidates that they just stayed home. And so that's what gave Obama those two comfortable victories, 2008 and 2012. But none of it ever helped Obama in any of the congressional races. So he had, he did disastrously when it came to helping Democrats in House races and in Senate races. It was just simply Republicans would not show up, perfectly understandably, to vote for John McCain and Mitt Romney. They were disasters, absolute disasters. Which was me, and so that's what made Obama really an unpopular president who nonetheless won two easy elections. So in other words, the country was still divided, and I think at least 50% of the public really detested Obama, but he nonetheless managed to prevail for himself. Now, something similar is going on with Starmer. Starmer is very unpopular, and he won for one reason only: the Tories. The Tories just wouldn't vote. I mean, they just simply sat on their hands. They wouldn't show up and vote for the Tory party, and so the Tories were just simply annihilated in that July the 4th election, and that's why Starmer got this ridiculous landslide victory when there was clearly no landslide mandate for Starmer, and I think Starmer knows it, which is why Starmer is reacting with such fury at the British people, who he knows absolutely detest him. Now, going back to your question, Donatke, will it matter on the ballot? The only thing that I can say is, it's not going to be, it will be a close election. I think it will be close. But if we look at the polls, the Democrats really are not doing well, and that's if you just compare them with the 2016 and the 2020 races. You remember 2016, I think Hillary Clinton, I think, got 3.5% more percentage greater in the popular vote than Trump did. Trump won narrowly. I think Biden got 4.5%, and then he won narrowly. So that suggests that if you have even if you're a Democrat and you have a lead of about, say, anything less than 4% over Trump, you will not win the election. So that 3.5% win for Hillary Clinton wasn't sufficient to win the 2016 election. Biden won very narrowly. It was about, I think, 4.5%. I can't remember the exact numbers. 4.5%, and it was just really, in the end, something like 40,000 votes decided it for Biden. So the current polls basically have them neck and neck. So that's a very bad result for the Democrats. As I said, if 3.5% lead for Hillary Clinton wasn't sufficient for her to win, then a dead heat is an absolute disaster for the Democrats. And Harris has at no point built up anything like that kind of a lead. And I think that the Harris momentum has come to an end. The Harris crescendo has come to an end. She just isn't liked very much. She's not a very impressive candidate, and the essential vacuity of Harris is apparent. Now, when again, will it matter? It'll still be close. So, however useless she is, it'll still be close. So it may be that in the final the final vote, in the final popular vote, it will be pretty much even. Maybe 0.2% one way or the other, which means that she's still done well. But it won't be. It just simply will not be enough to win the electoral college. So that's why I think that it's a real problem for her, but not a catastrophe. She will not lose in anything like by a big margin. This will not be any kind of a big victory for Trump, which is itself surprising. I mean, when you think how ridiculous the Harris candidacy is, somebody who was deemed totally useless and incompetent vice president, a disaster, just a few months ago, has been catapulted into this kind of a combination of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Barack Obama, just to give it a multiracial twist. So, it's all completely fraudulent. I don't think, now, with this is September the 10th, a lot of things may happen, probably will, but I don't think she's going to win this. There's just not. She doesn't have enough going for her at this stage to pull this off. But I think there are all sorts of things that may happen. I mean, war against Russia, possibility. We have Russiagate 3.0. We could have, there could be other shoes to drop with this Russia thing. I mean, that's September. I think they're keeping their powder dry, and maybe they're planning another huge indictment drop sometime in October. So there's still all sorts of things that could they could secure it for Kamala. But if, as things stand, and nothing else happens, then I don't think she's going to win. Anyway, also, it's been over a month. When is the brilliant 55D trap laid in Kursk gonna spring shot and totally destroy for the umpteenth time, no less, the Ukro-Nazistan, which just drone bombed Moscow today, by the way, probably with rented drones, yet they don't have any left since February. Well, I think that's a very good point about the 1 month since Kursk. It's very interesting that the experts, Mearsheimer, John Mearsheimer, professor, Chicago University, we're all supposed to fall down on our knees before Mearsheimer, because he's a realist. Who isn't a realist? I'm a realist. So. But anyway, Mearsheimer tells us this is a completely useless operation in Kursk, totally disaster for Ukraine, and a great opportunity for Russia. Okay, now the thing that occurs to me right away, and you even hinted at it in your question, is, well, it's now more than a month, and yet Ukraine is embedded on Russian soil. So not only are they embedded on Russian soil, but Russia's not able to push them out. They still haven't pushed them out. It's been a month. They haven't pushed them out. Remember when the Kursk incursion took place, we were assured that it was going to be over in a matter of hours. They're going to be driven out within a matter of hours. If not in a matter of hours, then within a matter of days. So it's now been a month, which means that not only are they dug in Kursk, but Ukraine is able to resupply them. So Russia has not been able to cut off the lines of supply and communication to this force in Kursk. Now, the Mearsheimer argument, and that's repeated everywhere, is that, well, it doesn't really matter because Russia hasn't moved any of its forces out of Donetsk in order to take care of this problem in Kursk, and they're still making steady progress in Kursk, in Donetsk rather, So therefore, the Kursk ploy has failed. That's assuming that that's what the goal, the Ukraine goal was. We don't know exactly what the Ukraine objective was, but even let's say it is the Ukrainian objective. That was the Ukrainian objective. Russia, however, has not taken the bait. Russia has not moved its forces from Donetsk into Kursk, and instead Russia is plowing on, to go after Pokrovsk. All right, let's say that's true. What does that tell us about the state of Russia's armed forces? It doesn't have anyone else. This is supposed to be the second biggest army in the world, the second biggest military force in the world, and basically its entire military is taken up in Ukraine. They don't have any other forces to move to Kursk to drive out the Ukrainian forces. That's what it seems like. I mean, maybe there still is somewhere these forces, but where are they? Now, to say that, this territory that they've captured, this is the line of McGregor, Colonel McGregor, this territory that they've captured is of no significance. No significance, no strategic significance at all. It's like capturing Pine Barrens in New Jersey. All right. Would the United States tolerate for one moment a kind of an invasion, a Mexican-Chinese invasion that seized a part of Arizona and decided to hold on to this territory? And then, but the Americans said, "Man, we kind of got other fish to fry. We're fighting in Iraq, we're fighting in Afghanistan, fighting against Iran. We're going to deal with this problem in Arizona at some later stage." I don't think so. I don't think any country just simply tolerates its territory getting invaded. It just doesn't. I mean, that's what comes if you're a great power. If you're a great power, you have to ensure that everybody's afraid of you, that no one dares to mess with you, no one dares to kind of invade you and seize a piece of your territory, because you're going to hit them, like a fly swatter hitting a fly. But that hasn't happened. And if we're supposed to celebrate the fact that Russia hasn't taken the bait, Russia hasn't moved any of its forces out of Donetsk in order to take care of this problem in Kursk, and therefore the Ukrainian plan has failed. If we're supposed to celebrate that, then you have to then accept the corollary is that Russia doesn't have any other forces. That's it. Russia has used up all of its forces in Ukraine. It doesn't have any armed forces stationed anywhere in Russia that it can bring into Kursk to drive out the Ukrainians. That's it. Basically, that Russia doesn't have any other forces except for what's in Ukraine. That's not good news. And NATO is watching this, and NATO is drawing conclusions. Well, Russia doesn't have any other forces other than what's fighting in Ukraine and sustaining serious casualties in Ukraine. NATO is going to draw certain conclusions from that, which means that Russia has been weakened by this war, and that they can engage in more of these invasions without Russia knowing exactly how to deal with this problem. Why not a kind of a Polish-Lithuanian invasion to seize a part of Russia? Why not a Swedish-Latvian invasion to take a part of Russia? Why not do that? I mean, Russia hasn't been able to deal with this Kursk problem, so why not create more headaches for Russia? What about seizing, which I think is really on the cards, and I'm surprised they haven't done it yet, which is seizing Transnistria, that piece of territory occupied by Russia in Moldova. That would be very easy. Russia has no border with Moldova. It's going to be a real problem for Russia to do anything about Transnistria. And you remember the days when we used to talk about Russia was going to build a land bridge to Moldova in order to be able to take care of the Transnistrian problem. That was when Russia was going to take Odessa, as well as the Black Sea, Ukraine's Black Sea coast, in order to build that land bridge to Transnistria. So that's another thing on the card. So that's the problem. That the longer this goes on in Kursk, the more it's going to give NATO ideas that Russia is pretty much extended. I mean, completely unless Russia orders a full mobilization, it just doesn't have any other forces to fight with. And Putin, for some reason, doesn't want to order a full mobilization. So that's why this is a problem. Is Kursk, and McGregor and Mearsheimer can talk about, this is of no importance. It's just taking Pine Barrens. Well, it is quite important. You still haven't been, it's been a month, and you still haven't been able to push them out of your own country. So NATO is watching this. That's what they do. They're watching this and then making their own planning. And again, the significance. We talk a lot about Boris Johnson and his sabotage of the Istanbul Accords. And, Boris Johnson is an utterly loathsome, disgusting scumbag. However, what he did was entirely what you would expect some NATO operator to do. Because by April of 2022, they saw weaknesses in Russian military maneuvering, in Russian military power. And that's why they went to Zelensky and said, I'm not at all sure that Russia has the capability of winning this war. So Zelensky, the Ukrainians panicked and were ready to sign that agreement because, like everyone else, they assumed Russia was immensely strong, and therefore, hey, we better do a deal now, otherwise things are going to get much worse. And then Johnson, obviously speaking on behalf of the Americans, on behalf of NATO, said, "Well, I wouldn't do that." And that's really the problem when you don't deal with problems such as Kursk, or you don't get the result that you needed to in those early days of the so-called SMO, is that NATO is going to seize these opportunities, take advantage of your weaknesses, and really put the screws in. That's what they do. There's no point in complaining about it. That's who they are. That's what they do. Anyway, Brian, T1, good to see you. And Brian says Trump could well win at the ballot box, but it has also been mentioned that the results of the election wouldn't be certified. They just don't want to let go of the White House. No, that's a very good point. I mean, that's where it gets very difficult, because if the Democrats win the House, which is quite possible, they do all this redistricting and so on. So it's by no means impossible that they do win the House. The Democrats will not certify a Trump victory. That would be very interesting. What happens then? Because they could take it to the Supreme Court, but I don't know whether the Supreme Court will exactly will take the case, because the Supreme Court may just say, well, look, this is really, not within our jurisdiction. This is a matter that has to be decided by Congress. They're the ones who have to certify or not certify an election outcome, and then they will start the horse trading. Whom will they certify? So if you say Trump, they won't certify Trump. Okay, will they certify J.D. Vance? Probably not. They'll probably say no to J.D. Vance as well. So then you continue. Well, whom will they certify? And then then it does really get very interesting. Whether if the Republicans have to then select somebody who will be certified. The Supreme Court made a very narrow ruling on the obviously on the issue of when the Colorado and other states kicked Trump off the ballot because they claimed, oh, Trump was an insurrectionist, therefore this is in violation of the 14th Amendment. But they made a very narrow ruling. They just simply said, well, it's not up to individual states. Individual states can't just simply take somebody off the ballot. It's a federal election, and so individual states can't make that determination. However, they left open the possibility that at a federal level, you could take someone off the ballot. So they didn't at all rule on the matter of whether that issue of the 14th Amendment, which is that you can say that this presidential candidate is an insurrectionist and therefore he's in violation of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court didn't touch that issue. So they didn't touch the issue whether Trump was or was not an insurrectionist and whether the 14th Amendment would apply to him. So therefore, if the House of Representatives said, well, we're not going to certify, then, the Supreme Court may take up the case, but then that would be a brand new case, and then they would have to then determine the meaning of the that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That would take a little bit of time to do, well, they might decide not to. They might just decide, it's not up to us. They might say that you can't just simply invoke the I think that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. You have to pass some legislation that would disqualify a particular person. They might rule along those lines. But yeah, that's a constitutional crisis, down the road. It's not at all going to be easy for Trump to cross all these hurdles. Anyway, thank you. And then Stone River, thank you very much for your generosity. So Stone River says the right of free speech, the right of people to assemble, and their right to petition their government are all enshrined in the First Amendment. Absolutely correct. Those who seek to suppress these rights are a threat to democracy. Now, you're absolutely correct, and it is in the First Amendment, and it is the uniqueness of the United States. Probably the greatest thing about the United States that it actually placed this. The free speech, and that government does not have the right to limit free speech in any way. That's in the Constitution. Now, it doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not anywhere else. They say, yeah, we're for free speech, except when free speech is a threat to somebody or other. Chiefly, it's a threat to the ruling powers. And so, therefore, we can just simply say, but there's an exception, of course, because free speech is great, but if free speech is a threat to public order, or if free speech is a threat to security, or if free speech is a threat to good governments, or free speech is a threat to public health, free speech is a threat to the happy functioning of society. There's always a million exceptions that you can introduce and curtail free speech. And that's the way it works in most parts of the world. That's the way it's always worked through human history, which is that there's a greater, higher good than individual free speech. And therefore, whether it's the church, whether it's the king, whether it's the state, there's always a good reason to curtail free speech because it's for the public good. The public good will be threatened by individuals saying bad and dangerous things. And that's the genius of the American system, Whether it can survive, I don't really know. I mean, we saw under Biden, but it started under Trump, the Trump Justice Department, whereby government, not directly, so the government wanted to get around the Constitution, get around the First Amendment. So the government essentially leaned on third parties. So if they got the third parties to exercise censorship, and therefore they imagine that, well, now we've got around the whole First Amendment stricture against government shall not abridge speech. But we had the lower court rulings in the Missouri case. We had the lower federal court, and then the circuit court essentially said, no, this is a violation of the First Amendment. Where there is a third party does it, if it does it at the behest of government, then it is still a First Amendment issue. But the Supreme Court ducked the issue and said that these state governments had no standing, and then it just threw it out. So they didn't rule on the merits, or whether you can use government can use social media in order to silence people. They just said, oh, they had no standing. But yeah, but no question. I think that free speech is, and the rest of it, the rest of the First Amendment, the right of people to assemble and to petition government, are crucial. Who wants to suppress those people? Well, people in power. People in power, and of course all their adjuncts who are sort of like lapdogs, who enjoy consorting with people in power because of all the favors that are bestowed on them. And I'm talking, of course, about the media. The media love to be around people with power, then they feel that they themselves have power, and they enjoy all the perks of power, and therefore they're ready to tell us that it's for our own good. What the government does is for our own good. So anyway, thank you very much, Stone River, for your generosity. Carlos says, it's pretty cold here in Ottawa too, and I'm also a bit depressed about it. Well, I really agree with that, because this is what comes with this fall weather. And what's really terrible about it is that it goes on and on and on and on, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And there's really no let up in this brutality of the cold days and the cold sunless days, greenless days, until probably next March. So this is September, and we're not talking about March. That just tells us just what a dismal future is in store. Anyway, Stone River goes on. If Harris, after decades in the public eye, has to reintroduce herself to the American people, she can't have made much impression on them in the past. Well, when you say something like that, it's absolutely correct. But nobody ever says that in any of these panel shows on mainstream media. I don't often watch them. But sometimes I tune in to CNN, and they all talk like this. Well, she has to reintroduce herself, and she has to differentiate herself from Trump. She has to show that she's an agent of change, and you precisely think like, well, she's been around. She's been a senator. She's been an attorney general. She was a district attorney of San Francisco. She's been a vice president. She's had every opportunity to introduce herself to the American people. And now suddenly, with 2 months to go before the election, she has to reintroduce herself. And all these media types that sit there and these shows, they just say these things. Oh, she has to reintroduce herself. She has to make clear that she isn't she's not a clone of Biden. She's an agent of change. Well, how can you be an agent of change? You got that job for one reason only, because Biden declared that you are to be his successor. And then everybody immediately jumped in and said, yeah, we support Harris. We support Harris. So you're entirely dependent upon Biden. And so, oh no, she has to differentiate herself from Biden. And of course, she's the agent of change. So Trump is the status quo, even though Trump hasn't been in power for almost 4 years. No, she's the agent of change. She has been vice president for 4 years, and she's supposed to be now the agent of change. And they say these things without any sense of irony, without any sense of what I'm saying is so totally idiotic um, that a 5-year-old can see how preposterous what I'm saying is, but you never get any of that in the media. Anyway, thank you so much, Stone River, for your generosity. Brian says, let's hope the American people have noticed about her not having made much of an impression on them. Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm going to see if we can do a live stream of the debate, because it'd be fun if we can do a live stream and then everybody can join in and offer up their comments. Let me first of all, Cynthia. Cynthia, always very good to see you. Always, thank you very much for your generosity. And so Cynthia is talking, about the film that we screened yesterday, L.A. Confidential. As always, when we do our screenings, I mean, a lot of the fun comes from Cynthia's really outstanding commentary and information and all sorts of observations about the history of the making of the film and generally about the history of the film. So if you go to the screenings page on our locals page, you'll see that you can obviously watch the film, but you can absolutely read Cynthia's comments and and learn from them. I always do, so I learn a great deal from all of Cynthia's commentary. Anyway, so Cynthia says, L.A. Confidential is a very good film, but alas, it comes across to me as too much of a nostalgic period film. Perhaps I wouldn't feel quite this way about the film if I hadn't seen so many classic film noirs over the years, but that's not the case. So I find myself walking away from the film feeling as though I just got burned by buying a slick reproduction rather than an authentic antique. It's worth watching once, but I don't see myself watching it any more than that. I think that's true. It's always a problem when filmmakers kind of redo the whole film noir genre many years afterwards, that they always come across as somewhat fake. Chinatown, I think, was a more successful version of that. And the one I thought that was quite funny, because it wasn't quite a remake as such, and so let's set it in the in 1940s or whatever. Was Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye. He made that, I think, in 1973 with Elliot Gould playing a Philip Marlowe. Why that film, I think, succeeded, though not everyone agrees with me that it succeeded, because I think Philip Marlowe is such a beloved, iconic figure, and people associate him, obviously, with Humphrey Bogart, even though other pretty good actors actually played Philip Marlowe. Dick Powell played Philip Marlowe rather well. But essentially people think of Philip Marlowe as Humphrey Bogart. And as streetwise tough guy, someone you don't mess with. But Robert Altman he made Marlowe, Elliot Gould, circa 1970s LA, with all the wisecracking and the self-deprecation and everything. And it was funny because The Long Goodbye, when Altman made it, was actually set in 1970s Los Angeles. So he didn't try to set it in the 1940s. So I take your point. I mean, I also don't feel that I want to watch the film again. Um, but my problem isn't so much the set by setting it in the 1940s. First of all, I didn't think it was entirely plausible. The whole, I didn't really think that, hey, this is the 1940s. I just and I thought that as well about Chinatown, that I never really believed that this is happening, at any time other than the 1970s. Um, it just may be a limitation of the filmmaker. So when in The Godfather, when they did those scenes, not the scenes of the turn of the century, they were rather boring, but the scenes in again, I think 1940s Los Angeles, again, that I think Coppola, I think, really did capture something of that time. You really did feel as if you were in Los Angeles of the 1940s. I didn't think that at any time in L.A. Confidential you felt that. Even when in the scene when they had the real Lana Turner showing up. I mean, she didn't look like Lana Turner, for one thing, and it just none of it seemed believable. So I think that would be my issue, is that the whole nostalgia period nostalgia is just dubious. I mean, that didn't really work. The other problem I had with it is that the whole thing was just completely over the top. I mean, it was just so wildly implausible. The story of this police chief taking over the gangland operations of a gangster. I think it just seemed absurd. And then it just became a complete carnage at the end. I mean, just about everybody is killed off, and then strangely enough, the whole thing is covered up. And then that's presented as if it's a happy ending. Oh well, one guy gets a promotion. One of the heroes gets a promotion. The other one gets the girl, and they go off and live happily ever after. So it seems you've just covered up an appalling case of corruption, and we're supposed to feel cheerful about this. That this is and this is some sort of a happy ending. And there, I think it's different from Chinatown, which doesn't have a happy ending, and I think it works. Yeah, that's a really grim ending. So I just didn't think L.A. Confidential was really in the same league as Chinatown. The only thing I liked about it was, it went at a very cracking pace. So up until about, I don't know, a halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, you're enjoying yourself because it's all zipping along at a nice clip. Even if you don't fully understand what's going on, because the story is very hard to follow. But then I think it just completely unravels, and just becomes more and more wildly implausible. So I don't think, I mean, it got a huge, it won awards, and big, film critics loved it. I didn't think it was such a great film. I didn't think it at the time. I saw it at the time, and I didn't think it was that good. Other than, well, it's entertaining. You go in there for a couple of hours into the movie theater. You're entertained, but you really don't think that you've seen a great film. And Cynthia, I mean, some of the films that you listed as the great film noirs were infinitely superior to L.A. Confidential. I mean, Kansas City Confidential, that was a very good film noir. And of course, the Marlowe films are always very good. Film noir. So yeah, it was just, you know, it's an entertaining film, but not really a great film. But anyway, thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for all of your comments. And I think thank you also for your idea about, for the next week's film screening, about somehow Western perceptions of Russia and the Soviet Union. I've thought of a few possible titles, so I'm going to post them. We'll have another movie poll for which film to see. So there's a number of possible films about the portrayal of Russia and the Soviet Union. So we could have some fun. One of which I think was Ninochka, which is, again, it's a lot of fun. Anyway, W. Baker says it's a lovely 30 degrees here in Alabama. Well, that's nice. I definitely think I should move over there, move where there aren't these brutal season changes, which get harder and harder to take as I get older. Come to the light on the propaganda front. Surely it must add to your depression. Well, a lot of things. That's why to have to study the press, yes, and its propensity to push forward child murder and child care, since the state has pushed mothers into the workforce. Is there any worse vermin in the world than those narrative carriers for the deep state? Very nicely put. I do like, I always worry that I'm the only person who likes to use the word vermin to describe people I don't like. So people say, whoa, you can't use that sort of word. That's a very strong word. But I'm glad to see you also like to use that word. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I absolutely agree with you. And it is an interesting issue how, and particularly abortion, really, what are those horrible, barbaric practices that there is? I mean, it's just a shocking practice, unnecessary practice, because we know that there are so many methods of birth control now available. So there's absolutely no reason for putting to death a life. But what is interesting is the first way that this is celebrated, this right to abortion, as some great constitutional right, and that is some fantastic great deed, that is celebrated, like somebody writes a manifesto and then he's punished for it, or somebody writes a poem and is punished for it. So supposedly some great expression of the indomitable human spirit. Having an abortion, there's something really wrong with that. And then you think that there is an obscenity that people should have created the situation whereby we celebrate the taking of a human life. Now, the issue of that's why they use all of these euphemisms, not to have to explain that they're talking about abortion and what exactly abortion is. So they use the euphemism. For years it used to be choice. Oh, well, I'm for choice. And you think, well, choice to do what? Well, no, it's choice. You never spell out what that choice is. It's just choice. I'm for choice. Well, I'm against choice. Then now they have the reproductive rights. So again, reproductive rights, you say, well, it's my right to reproduce. So it's my right to have a child. You think, well, that sounds good. Yeah, that should be a basic human right. Your right to reproduce. If you want that, you should be able to have children, however many children you want. That should be a right, as long as, of course, you're able to provide for them. So again, reproductive rights again sounds really good. Yeah, well, who wouldn't be for reproductive rights? Again, you never say what you're really talking about. Saying like Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood. Well, that sounds great. Planned Parenthood. That's a good thing. Plan. Well, yeah. Obviously, parents have to plan and decide. how many children they will have, and then and then take whatever precautions or whatever they intend to take in order to have whatever they want as parents. Um, so, but again, it's a wonderful what Planned Parenthood, basically what Planned Parenthood does is abortions. I mean, that's what they do. That's their raison d'être. I mean, they don't do anything else other than provide abortions. But again, it's sort of the liberal order that has made this very disgusting, sordid practice, something that one should be ashamed of, made this into some noble endeavor. Now, childcare is again a very odd case because there's a very it's a very strange argument that the government should provide childcare because it means somebody else has to subsidize childcare. So in other words, it's the a family in which, say, the mother does stay at home and looks after children. That family has to subsidize another family in which both husband and wife, or not even necessarily husband and wife, both partners are out working. So they get to be subsidized. So they you have the woman, she goes out to work, just the man goes out to work, and they get subsidized by a family in which one of the caregivers has decided not to go out to work, but is instead looking after a child. There's a real issue of justice involved here. I mean, why should that group of people subsidize another group of people? I mean, if you want to stay home, you could stay home with your children. If you don't want to stay home, you want to go out to work, or you have to go out to work, then again, that's a choice, and then you have to make a decision how you're going to arrange it. But the notion that the government is going to step in and decide, which it means essentially that we are going to take from you to subsidize them, that means the government is making a choice. It's making a choice in favor of those couples who both go out to work, and therefore they need somebody else to look after the child. And so it's manifestly unfair. I mean, government should have no business stepping in to the decisions, which I think are entirely personal decisions. Everybody has to make their own personal decision how they're going to look after their children. The government has no business stepping in and deciding that this is a more favorable way of life and this is a less favorable way of life. So kind of agree with you, W. Baker. Thank you. And then Cynthia says, granted, J.D. Vance should have checked his sources before claiming that Haitian immigrants in Ohio were eating people's cats, but the liberal media was being entirely reckless for claiming that he was making a racist statement. So why is it that whenever whites say anything that's in the least bit negative of black, it's always construed as being racist, while it's never the case that blacks say anything like that about whites? But you're absolutely right. I mean, that's always the case. You can always say anything negative about white people, even to use that as a derogatory term. Just using, it's just white. This is all white people. Like that guy, that Scottish national first minister, who's went through a litany of all the people who had positions in Scotland, and he said they were white. They were always as a term of insult. It's a derogatory term that white. And the measure of that is exactly. Imagine if you're saying that you're disgusted by the fact that all these positions are held by blacks. I mean, you can't do it. And that's fine. I mean, you shouldn't say that. But the notion that somehow calling people white is an insult. And of course, the worst insult you can do is to say somebody is white male. So yeah, and yeah, so yeah, got obviously they're making a field day out of this. However, the point isn't, whether did they, where the cats hanged or and so on. The point is nonetheless that here are people within Ohio, similar to the people in the UK, or the people in Southport, or the people in Solingen in Germany and everywhere else. They kind of want their communities to remain the way they are. People are funny like that. They want to, they live in their homes. They want their homes to remain the way it used to be, the way their parents lived in them. They don't really want change, and they don't want to accommodate, um, a lot of new people with whom they have nothing in common, and who are basically only there, to get some money, and then maybe send it back home, or who knows. And the notion of just sort of inflicting this on people, the people have no say in the matter, just inflicting it on them, and that's happening. Governments throughout the West, they're inflicting migrants on them. So it doesn't matter whether you get something wrong, you get it wrong about hanging cats or whatever. Um, it's a minor issue. I mean, it's a triple. This is, again, the media always do this. They always pick on something like that to discredit the the sentiment, which is perfectly understandable, which is that we don't really want people dumped on us that we didn't actually ask for. The government has decided to dump this on us. So the same thing happened in Southport after the killing of those three little girls. Oh, they got it wrong. It wasn't a Muslim migrant. No, 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 no. We got it wrong. No, it was a second generation immigrant. Again, the immigrant who shouldn't really have been in the country at all. There was no reason for him to be in the country at all. It was a second generation immigrant who committed these horrific murders. So, but now you have to put them in prison because they got it wrong, and they said it was a Muslim migrant. It wasn't a Muslim migrant. No, it was a second generation immigrant. Big deal. So that's that's they always do this. And W. Baker, thank you for your generosity for the Hound Dog Protection Path. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really appreciated, because I need to be protected. I don't get any of this. I don't get any money at all. It all goes to them. They don't share any money with me, but they do insist that I deliver the goods for them. I'm under an obligation to them. They, however, are under no obligation to me. That's really their philosophy. So thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity. And somebody said, yeah, Brian says, Humza Harun Yusuf. That's who I was talking about, former Scottish First Minister, and that I was referring to. Yeah, that's exactly the one who made this speech, and he went through this whole this litany of all. It was a list of all the people who had all sorts of important positions in Scotland. And he kept, and to this person, he had nothing else to say about them. He was white. He was white, 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 and which is not surprising, because I think I don't know what the population of Scotland, what percentage of it is white, but pretty high percentage. That's not true about the rest of the United Kingdom. Certainly isn't true about England. Definitely not true about London or Birmingham or any of the big cities. But in Scotland, it was overwhelmingly white. But he said white, white. And again, the way he said it was this was USA versus Soviet film suggestion. I think Marty says the right stuff. So well, I'm thinking more in terms of portrayals of Russia in that Russia on the life on Russia, life in the Soviet Union, and Russians in general. I can't remember. Was there much of that in the right stuff? I don't really remember that. I think that's the idea. I mean, because I think the Cynthia suggested it apropos of Ninochka, which I mean, some of it does take place in the Soviet Union, but much of it takes place in Paris, and but the chief figures in Ninochka are themselves Russians, played by, of course, Greta Garbo. Yeah, so anyway, Mojo 1982 says, "Hi George, hope you are well. It's been suggested that the U.S. has finally agreed to allow Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to hit targets in Russia proper. How will Russia retaliate, if it retaliates at all? What do you make of drone scares in Romania and Latvia? The Baltic states have reacted hysterically, and they try to downplay the supposed drone incident. Is Russia boiling the frog with these supposed drone incursions into NATO's periphery?" Well, I mean, the first part with the ATACMS, I think that they will give Ukraine the go-ahead to use them. But the point is that what happens then? I mean, the Russians keep saying, "Well, these are red lines." Okay, this, they've said before these are red lines, but I don't quite see what Russia's options are at this stage, because Russia has already accepted the principle that Western weapons, all these deadly Western weapon systems, can be delivered to Ukraine, and Ukraine can use them against Russia. They've accepted, indeed, that Western weapon systems, the HIMARS, which don't have such a long range, that the HIMARS can be used on Russian territory, but it's not deep inside Russian territory. So essentially, the argument that NATO has been making, we are not a party to the conflict. Yes, we provide Ukraine with weapon systems. We provide Ukraine with tactical intelligence. We provide targeting information to Ukraine, but we are not a party to the conflict. So therefore, that Russia has accepted that. So therefore, if they start using these weapons, let's say if they start hitting weapons inside Russia, deep inside Russia, in what way? I mean, would Russia then say, "Well, now you are party to the conflict," having already accepted the principle that Ukraine can hit targets inside Russia using Western weapon system, using Western intelligence, and they've accepted that NATO is not a party to the conflict. They provide this, but they're not a party to the conflict. So now, why would Russia suddenly say, "Well, now NATO is a party to the conflict"? Even though everything is exactly the same. It's still Ukraine firing, at least according to the public information, Ukraine is firing the missiles. Ukraine is using intelligence provided by United States or NATO, or whatever. It's still the same. But let's say Russia decides, okay, that's a red line. We can't accept this. NATO is a party to the conflict. What happens then? What does Russia do then? Does Russia then attack NATO territory? Does it attack Poland? Does it attack Germany? If Russia were to do that, I don't see how Russia's situation would in any way improve. I mean, Russia's already having problems winning this war in Ukraine. Even if you accept McGregor and the rest, and they say Russia is winning this war. Okay, let's say Russia is winning this war in Donetsk. It's winning, grinding out this win. Pokrovsk next, then we got Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. At this day, on this schedule, maybe sometime next year, Donetsk will fall into Russian hands. Okay, let's say that is the schedule. How does Russia's situation improve by attacking any NATO territory? If Russia attacks NATO territory, then NATO immediately goes to war against Russia. I mean, when I say immediately go, I'm not saying they necessarily immediately attack Russia, but then NATO will effectively say, we are now at war with Russia. How does that improve Russia's position? Now they've got a 32 nation alliance that is at war with it. So it doesn't do anything. I mean, the problem arose almost from the beginning when Russia essentially allowed this to happen, that NATO gradually, step by step, allowed Ukraine to use its weapon systems against Russia. And then step by step, they kind of escalated and escalated. One weapon system, another weapon system, and then finally, they said, okay, you can hit Russian territory, not too far inside Russia, but you can hit Russian territory. And now supposing they say, okay, well, you can hit further inside Russian territory. Why does that change? And how does, once Russia tolerated this, it doesn't improve Russia's situation. It's like, okay, well, that's it. We've had it. We are now going to hit NATO territory. There's no particular logic to it. I mean, why would hitting NATO territory make any more sense now than it did a year ago? Just because these missiles are hitting targets deeper inside Russia than before, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you didn't attack NATO territory when they use these Leopard tanks, or whether you use them, the HIMARS or whatever, why would you suddenly now think, well, now we have to hit NATO territory? And again, how does that improve your position? Because now you're now fighting a war with NATO. I mean, you've already been fighting 2.5 years against Ukraine, grueling, with heavy losses on all sides. And now it's going to be, well, now we're going to hit NATO territory, so you've got to deal with NATO. So I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think Russia is going to attack NATO territory, and because I don't think it will improve its situation, which means that NATO is going to keep doing more and more of what it's doing. It's going to say, hey, we can hit Russian territory really without any consequences. And this is really, I think Russia's got itself into this situation by taking a very tolerant attitude at the beginning, and then step by step, now it can't really do anything without provoking something that it's been very loath to do, which is a war with NATO. So NATO says, well, we can do it. I mean, we can just go on providing all these weapon systems and providing all this targeting information and hitting targets deep inside Russia without any real consequence, because Russia does not want a war with NATO. Perfectly understandable. And so I think, what I think is going to happen. Yes, I think the Americans will give the go-ahead to Ukraine to use the ATACMS, and I think that there won't be any consequence. I don't think Russia will retaliate against NATO, and I don't think it makes any sense for Russia to retaliate against NATO. Not at this stage, because at this stage it will be to provoke a serious military confrontation with NATO. And I don't know that Russia, after 2.5 years of fighting in Ukraine, I just don't think Russia, has the the resources to go down that path. So I think that's it's a real problem. I mean, if you write these red lines and then you cross these red lines, then you don't really have much more, because then you say, well, why is that a red line? And if you could cross that red line, how does that improve your position? I mean, because you really don't want to get in at this stage. You really don't want to get into a kind of a missile exchanges with NATO. That just isn't. That's not going to help you in any way. So So, gosh, how will Russia retaliate? I don't think it will. So yeah. And then what do you make of the drone scares? Well, I mean that I think is an interesting one with the drone scares in Romania and Latvia is I, I mean I think the Baltic states, Romania, the Czech Republic, Poland, they really want to trigger this NATO Russia war. I mean I think that they've been doing this really from the beginning, and they want to use these drone scares or missiles landing on their territory as a way of triggering this NATO-Russia war. At this moment, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think NATO is going to be sucked into it. I think NATO's got a very good deal. They can send these weapon systems, which is very nice for the military-industrial complex. They can hurt the Russians badly. They can really, kill a lot of Russians. They can keep the war going, which again is good for the military-industrial complex, without suffering any casualties. And conveniently, they now see that Russia has no intention of escalating this war into a confrontation with NATO. So NATO go, well, we can just go on doing this. I mean, it's great. We use our missiles. We kill a lot of Russians, and they don't retaliate against us, so we don't lose any lives at all. We're doing very nicely. It's the Russians who are having to endure this. So I don't think NATO is going to go down the path of using these drone scares to get into a shooting war with Russia. I don't think that's what they want. I think they're happy to play along with this proxy war, but that's not the agenda of the Baltics, Poland, Romania. They want that. They do want that war very badly. I think that's I don't see. I really, it's funny. I was thinking when Putin was speaking in Vladivostok on was it last week, and then everyone obviously paid attention to his comments about Harris, which were kind of funny. But what was, I thought, interesting is there was the moment they were talking about the peace talks and everything else. Let's see if I can find this interesting comment that he made. Let's see. Yeah. It's always exciting with Rumble. I never know if it's going to work or not. Let's see. Is this it? Yeah, this may be it. Yeah, okay. So here we have the question that was asked from Putin. He says here that let's play from the current slide. So it says, you have already said that Kiev may negotiate with Russia after the failure of its provocation in the Kursk region. But before that, it turns out there were still prospects for a peaceful settlement of the situation. And then Putin says, we have already spoken about this many times. We have reached practically all the parameters of a possible peace agreement with government representatives in Kiev. We have agreed on everything. Moreover, the head of the negotiating delegation, and he still heads the ruling party faction in the Rada in parliament, has signed these agreements. Yes, some things still needed to be worked out. He's talking about Istanbul, basically that the April 2022, Istanbul. So they has signed these agreements. Yes, some things still needed to be worked out, but overall, it is a document. And then Mr. Johnson arrived, as is known. The British authorities do not deny this. They confirm it. He arrived and gave the Ukrainians the order to fight to the last Ukrainian, which is what is happening today, with the aim of achieving a strategic defeat for Russia. This is not working, and the Ukrainian official authorities publicly stated that if they had carried out what we agreed with them and not listened to their masters from other countries, the war would have stopped long ago. So again, he's lamenting Johnson's intervention and the fact that no agreement was signed in Istanbul. And as I said earlier, why would Johnson be expected to behave in any other way? Of course, he's a scumbag. He's a scumbag prime minister of the United Kingdom. That's what he would do. And so, and then he says, they took a different path. Here is the result. And then he goes on, are we ready to negotiate with them? We have never refused this, but not on the basis of some ephemeral demands, but on the basis of those documents that were agreed upon and actually initialed in Istanbul. Now, I think it's very interesting. He says there in Vladivostok that this agreement that he's ready to sign with Ukraine was really will be based on the agreements that were signed in Istanbul, which is kind of interesting because I was under the impression that that deal was now no longer on the table. That Russia said, "Well, that's it. You didn't accept the deal that we gave you then, which was a good deal, and it was a good deal for Ukraine, a lousy deal for Russia, no question. It was not a good deal for Russia." But he says, "Oh, well, that agreement is still on the table." That's the implication of what he said in Vladivostok. That agreement is still on the table. And that I find very odd because, you've gone through this whole 2.5 years, this horrific war. And why would you offer this deal? And particularly if essentially Putin was saying in Vladivostok and that Russia is winning this war. And we have it from McGregor and Mearsheimer, Professor Mearsheimer. We have it all that Russia is really winning this war in Donetsk. Why would you offer the agreement that was already rejected by Ukraine at the behest of Johnson and the Americans? Why would you offer that? Surely you would offer them a much tougher terms. You say, no, well, that you're not getting that agreement. You turned us down. We've lost I don't know how many lives since then. We've got it's a new deal that's going to be on the table. So that's where I think this is pointing to is the outlines of a settlement. And then I've said this before. I think the outlines of a settlement will be a partition of Ukraine. The parts of Ukraine will be incorporated within the Russian Federation. Maybe by the time a deal is signed, the whole of Donetsk will be under Russian control. Maybe. I mean, if things move in Russia's direction as they seem to be in Donetsk with Pokrovsk and then Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, and then basically then Donetsk will be in Russia's hands. Then Russia, Putin will turn around and say, well, at least we've got Donetsk and Lugansk. We don't have the whole of Kherson. We've got some of Kherson. We don't have the whole of Zaporozhye. We've got some of it. Those will be the lines of the partition. As for the rest, basically, I mean, then that will be incorporated within, the Western structures, and effectively, Ukraine will be in NATO. There won't be any negotiated outcome. There won't be a negotiated settlement, just as there wasn't really during the Cold War. There was no peace treaty on Germany. Germany was divided between the West and East. There was no peace conference. There was no peace treaty that signed and said these were to be the borders of West Germany, East Germany. There will not be a peace conference. There will just be the de facto boundaries and probably some kind of a ceasefire. Maybe Trump, if he's president, will just push for some sort of a ceasefire, and that will hold for a few years. And it's better than a war. Um, but what I'm saying is that all the rest, all the fantasies that the people put forward, Russia's going to march to Kiev, march on Kiev, they're going to take Odessa, they're going to take Kharkov, and all this. It ain't going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. We can see, and even from what Putin's remarks, you can see where it's going and how he's thinking about the future. He's not thinking of taking some big chunks of Ukraine. He's saying that. He says it there in Vladivostok. We go back to the Istanbul Accords. You sign this, and that's going to be the basis of the outcome. This is there won't be any negotiations, but that'll be effectively accepting the reality on the ground. Anyway, so yeah. Then anyway, Brian says, apropos of that, Hamza Harun Youssef says he wasn't the first one to do it, though. The Labour leader in Scotland also did it sometime before that. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I don't think I've seen that one. I've just listened to that speech of his about the white. He's white. The chief constable white. And he goes to all of these ministers white. It's a real insult. Anyway, let's see if there's any. And then Marty, tip jar favoritism. Look at the size of the microphone. Yeah, I think so. I don't think they like me very much. I think that's just I think that's just their attitude. I don't think they think I do a good job. They feel that they're the ones who are doing all the heavy lifting. So let's see. Anything else? Coop W says British people need MAGA. Yeah, it's an interesting issue. I don't, but that I don't, for the time being, I'm not sure. I'll think about it a little more. Why exactly Britain doesn't have a populist movement? There's a populist movement now in Germany, both on the right and on the left. There are populist movements in France. There are populist movements in Italy. I'm not saying they've been very successful. They haven't been successful so far anywhere. But you have populist movements in Austria. I think they're going to do well in the next month's elections. But Britain, that doesn't have any populist. The best they come up with is Nigel Farage. And Farage is a dud. He's never going to be a populist leader. There's no point in waiting. But those of us of an older generation will remember the Enoch Powell era. And Enoch Powell really was a populist leader. He was a very strange populist leader because he was a professor. He was a professor of classics. He had this a real kind of intensive way of expressing himself. He was anything but what you would expect from because he was really very much an academic. But he had a following. People really were hanging on his words throughout the country. So that's it's the closest that I can think of as someone who was a genuine populist. With Enoch Powell, but no one else. There's a lot of people, fake, phony, fraudulent, who try to play the populist card. I'm a man of the people, and then all this nonsense. But Powell, which I think makes him a real populist, he never pretended to be a man of the people. He always impeccably dressed, always wearing a three-piece suit, tie. He never made any small talk, any attempt to be, kind of a hail fellow, well met type character. Anyway, John Roberts says, George, when will Russia-Ukraine war end, and when will the political landscape of Eastern Europe? What will the political landscape of Eastern Europe look like after this? As I say, I think maybe there'll be some kind of a ceasefire, armistice, maybe sometime next year, maybe with the arrival of Trump. At the moment, I'm still thinking Trump will be the next president. Again, that's up in the air, and I'm not I'm by no means certain that's the case. But I think with Trump, um, that'll just somehow ease everything, and because I think he'll want to wrap this up. And if he can say, look, we'll have a partition, we get most of Ukraine. Russia gets some of it, but we get most of it. Then he can say, okay, we won. Russia can say that we won. So that'll be an outcome which both sides can say that we got something out of this. Just like with the partition of Germany. I mean, basically, the West got West Germany, the East got East Germany. I mean, East Germany was pretty good, but hey, West Germany was a much bigger chunk of it. So I really think that somehow the model to look for is the partition of Germany, and then they can think, hey, who knows? That's what the West will think. But who knows what will happen when Putin's gone? Maybe things will change. There'll be you never know with Russian leaders. There've been new leaders and suddenly completely new policies. So I think that's where it's heading. I don't think it's going to be any big offensives. I'm absolutely certain there'll be no more big offensives on Russia's side. And I mean, obviously, there's still all kinds of possibilities for the Western side. There could be more invasions of Russia. As I say, they could take Transnistria and so on. There could be escalation from the Western side. But if there aren't, and then we have the election, and Trump takes over, then I think something like Russia takes Donetsk and Lugansk, Kherson and Zaporozhye are partitioned, and then we just hold off for a few years, 5-10 years, see what happens. Not a great deal. I can't say that it's exactly been worth the war and worth so many lives lost. But hey, I'm I'm not the one who started this, so it's not my not my fault. Let's see if there's anything else. Mr. Boston says, I don't think America would react to London being torched, to be honest with you. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think it's hard. I mean, you're playing with that's a dangerous game to be playing, counting on somebody else not reacting. When you talk about Washington, you just don't know. There's so many wild people in Washington that even all the Lindsey Grahams and the rest. If I were a Russian leader, I wouldn't count on America doing nothing. I think that would be a very foolish step. Um, um, let's see. Hmm. Mr. Wonderful says the best movies about Russia are Russian movies. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's true. But I think the idea behind this is some American perceptions of Russia, how they see, uh, Russian people. Um, very, very. And again, I mean, some of these films are better than others. I mean, Ninochka is in many ways silly, but it's a fun movie, and Garbo was always fun to watch. I mean, she was an interesting actor to watch. I mean, she wasn't a great actor, but nonetheless, she did have a presence, and she was fun to watch. Um, uh, So Marco 4863 says Trump is not hated by the globalist elite because he's against war. They hate him because Trump is a threat to their climate change agenda. Trump signed out of the Paris Agreement. Well, I think that's part of it. I mean, I think that if one were to summarize why do they hate Trump, I don't think it's the policies. I think it's the populism. He's basically he's moved away from the kind of the establishment paradigm, and so therefore he's a threat. He's whipping up the mob. That's what really infuriates the kind of the global establishment, is that somehow you're allowing the masses to take part in the political process. They're just supposed to be quiet, uh, playing with their football or whatever, they taking an interest in every goddamn sporting event out there. Um, and they're not supposed to complain about all the manifest injustices, the injustice of the financial system, the economic system, industrial system, the military system, immigration system, all the various things that people are discontented about. And most of the time, people are very quiescent. They just accept everything. Okay, what the hell? And then occasionally, some political leaders come along and say, "Well, why are you putting up with this?" And that's the ultimate crime. When somebody emerges and said, "Well, why are you putting up with this?" And I think that's the reason. I mean, and the climate change agenda. I mean, it's just part of that. You're supposed to sign on. You're not supposed to say, "Hey, I kind of people want to stick with their fossil fuels." No. You're supposed to no. We kind of they've got to switch to electric vehicles. You're not supposed to, to go down that path. So I think that is so. It's anyone who I think is a populist, anyone who suddenly makes people think, makes people get very agitated about the injustices of the system, they have to be eliminated. Anyway, my time is up. Thank you very much, everybody who has commented, has contributed. Above all, everyone who has put some money into the dog's tip jar. I think you know what the situation is on Wednesday when I have to confront the dogs and how nasty it is, because they're not nice to me anyway. So it's always very difficult. So thank you, for your sympathy and your condolences and your willingness to help me out. So thank you. I'm going to try and post later on a live stream on the locals page, so the Gagglers can join and comment on the debate now, really, in just less than 4 hours, in just 3+ hours. So very, very, I'm sure everyone's really exciting. Everyone's very excited. So we'll reconvene during the live streaming of the debate. So please join. Thank you for today. We will be back on Thursday. Until then, all the best. See you. Bye-bye.